Assalamu alaikum everyone, welcome to another video about Python. This is Puya. In this tutorial I'm going to talk about again Python functions. This is the fourth video, if I'm not mistaken, that we're talking about functions. In this one we're going to talk about some advanced topics. So like always, without further ado, let's begin. So in this video I'm going to talk about scopes of functions and global variables and other stuff in the first section. Then we're going to talk about global keyword immutable arguments, and we're going to talk about mutable and mutable input arguments, and we're going to see arguments in args and key value args, passive statement, and at the end of it we're going to talk about a new feature called mandatory positional and the mandatory keyword arguments. So let's begin with scopes. Like other objects, function needs a scope, as you can see here. And there is a difference between variables that are defined inside the function of a scope and outside its function, outside its scope. As you can see here, this variable is defined outside of the function. Its scope. It is called global variable. Why do we call this kind of variables global variables? Because they don't belong to any other object. As you can see here, they just belong to the module that they are in it, and they don't belong to any class or any function, so they are called global variables. We know that we can create some variables that are inside of a function, like this one, var underline, and they are inner variables. So let's see what are the differences between these two type of variables and what we can do about them. So let me run this. As you can see, var underline is equal to var, which is defined outside of the scope of this function, plus input 1. And as you can see, input 1 is an input argument. So this also belongs to the inner scope of the function. And so, as you can see, we can access the global variables within the function's scope. So this is the one feature we see so far. We saw so far. As you can see, the var is equal to 10 and it is not changed, and var underline is equal to 20 and input 1 is equal to 10. So whether the reverse is also true or not, whether we can access to variables that are defined inside of the function or not, inside of a function or not. And as you can see, no, we cannot. Functions wrap an idea, wrap a code or something. So you can we cannot access the variables that are defined inside of that function. Like this one, as you can see, we cannot access to var underline, and the same goes for input arguments. As you can see, as I told you, input arguments are like any other variables that are defined inside of a function. So we can access from within a function to global variables, but the reverse is not possible. So let's talk about global, keyword, and immutable arguments. So consider that again, we've got a variable. As you can see, it is immutable because it is an integer. And if you don't know what is the difference between mutable and immutable variables, I encourage you to check my videos. You can find my videos in my GitHub repository and my YouTube account as well about data types. That I talk about data types. You can see the tutorials that are about mutable and immutable objects. So var1 is an integer and it is an immutable object. So whether can we change it? We want to see whether can we change a global variable inside of a function or not. We cannot access to input variables, definitely to variables that are defined inside of a function from outside of it. So when we can't access it, definitely we can't change it, but we know that we can access the global variables. So whether we can change them or not, as you can see here, it says the var is equal to 10, what happens when we change it to 20? And as you can see, no, it's not possible. We cannot change the global variables that's like this. Okay, we can access them, but we cannot change them. Although we change it to 20 inside of it, actually when we do this, we are not just changing the global variable to 20, we are just creating an inner variable which is also called var, and assigning 20 to it, and a 20 value to it, and that's it. So it's not possible to change the global variable like this. It's not going to change it. It is only going to define a new new variable inside of a function. So in some cases, maybe you really want to change your global variable within your function. There is a way to do so, and it's by using global keyword. As you can see, global is green like def, and for example, like not in Persian, like del. Both of the three of them are green, which means that they are keyword arguments defined by Python. They have a meaning for Python. When you use global, it creates a connection between the inner and outer variable, like this one. When you do so, here the connection is created, and whatever changes you make to this inner variable, it is going to affect the outer variable, and it doesn't matter whether it is immutable or mutable, but in this section we're just talking about immutable objects. So as you can see, the var is equal to 10. Here we change this to 20, and when we print it out here, when we get its value, it is equal to 20 because of this global var. So you may make there is a common mistake like this one, which I've seen a lot from my students. Let me explain this error. It's going to help us a lot. We have a global variable which is called c, which is equal to 1, and for example, inside of our function we want to increment it by 2, okay, or by 1, or by whatever. When we do this like this, because as I told you, we can access global variables, but we cannot change it. Because we cannot change it, when we use this two characters, which means c is equal to, we are creating an inner variable, let's say it that way. So when we're creating an inner variable, and again it is called c, the function, the Python or the scope of function, has a new variable which is called c, which is not it is not completely defined. Okay, it is not fully defined, because this line should be executed completely before this code is defined. So the problem is we have a variable which is not assigned completely, but we also want to access it. Okay, the moment the Python sees that c is equal to the other global variables, which are also, their name is also c, their names are c, they are overridden, so we cannot access global variables. So that's what happens when you want to increment or make change to a global variable inside of a function without using global. You may see this error that says local variable c referenced before assignment, because these two characters are the assignment part, and it's not over, and in the assignment part you are accessing to the same variable which is not assigned. So that's why you get error, which is called local variable reference before assignment. So how to solve this? To solve this local variable reference before assignment error, we can use global simply to say that, you know what, it's not a local variable, it's a global variable that I wanted to reference it. Okay, this section that I wanted to reference it, I wanted to reference a global variable which is already defined here. Okay, that makes the scenario completely. It says that you know what, there is a global variable which I want to connect it as a, which I want to define it as a local or inner variable as well. So when I want to reference it in this part, I'm referencing to something which is defined. So it is not going to have any error. It is not going to raise any error. So in this kind of in this scenarios that you want to make a change to a global variable, yeah, you can use a global keyword, but again, I encourage not to use it. So let's talk about input mutable arguments. So mutable input argument. Lists are mutable. So what happens when we pass in a list to a function? Okay, whether it changes or not, we saw that definitely mutables do not change. I can show you. Okay, I can, for example, create a new section for you, which I pass in this one. I pass in, for example, this immutable object here. Okay, and as you can see, when we pass in immutable item to a function, whether you change it or not does not matter. It is the global variable is not going to change. As you can see, c here is incremented by 2, and inner c or local c variable, doesn't matter what you call it, is equal to 2, but the global c is equal to 0 as it was defined here as input argument, let me call it. So let's see what is the case for mutable input arguments. Here we got a mutable variable which is called var, and which is equal to 10 and 2. Okay, a list that contains 10 and 2. We want to pass it as input argument. So as you can see, I have changed the first index, or index 0 here, and I assign it to 0, and even the inner and the outer arguments, both variables, both of them are changed, and both of them are called 0, are equal to 0 and 2. So you have to remember this. In Python, the variables are passed by reference. It means that immutable objects, they're not going to change. Definitely they're immutable. But if you pass a mutable object to a function and you change it inside of the function, it is going to be modified, like this one here, as you can see. So how we can prevent it from being modified like other immutable objects when we don't want them to be changed? We should copy them. When we copy them, actually, we're creating two sections inside the RAM, that those two sections are completely separated. Changing one object in one part of the RAM does not affect the other one. But when we when we don't copy it, we have just references, and changing the core of that object is gonna affect all the references to that object. So here, this is an example that shows you how to prevent this feature in Python. Whether this feature is good or it's not good, that's not the topic of this tutorial, but you have to keep it in mind that when you pass mutable objects to your function, if you change them inside your function, the global variables or the outer variables are also going to be changed. So, which we saw here, but here I use deep copy, which means to copy all the mutable objects. And when I change the input variable to 0, The global variable does not change. This is the outer input argument, or let me call it outer variable or global variable. It does not change. It is equal to what it was from the beginning, but the input variable changes. When we use deep copy, it means that we are creating two separated objects. They don't have any connection by any reference. They are two separated objects from two part of the RAM. So let's see another example about global, like this one that we had for immutable object. As you can see, we have C, which is equal to 0 and 1. Again, it's a list, immutable. Let's call it a mutable global variable. And here, for example, I change the C from within function, even though the C is not this mutable object is not passed as an input argument, but again the changes to this mutable object inside the function is gonna affect the global variable as well. As you can see, I have incremented the value in index 0 by 2, and after making these changes, the inner and the global variable, both of them are changed. And this shows that mutable objects, if you don't make a copy of them, which means making two separate objects of them, are just being referenced. So changing the core of that part of the RAM is gonna affect all the variables that are referencing that part of that section of the RAM. Again, we have the same error. Again, we are trying to create another variable and another local variable, which is, let me call it local, which is referencing the same local variable, which is not fully defined. So we're going to, doesn't matter whether it is immutable or mutable, this type of defining object, this type of assigning objects is going to raise error. To get away from those, we can use global keyword. A global keyword can be used for lists and also for immutable and also mutable objects as well. So this is all about mutable and immutable objects, how we can access to whether we can access to inner variables or global variables, and how we can make changes. So let's talk about args and kwargs, which args is accompanied with an asterisk, and kwargs with two asterisks. In Python, you're gonna see them a lot if you check source code of different modules and classes, and I'm gonna show one of them in Matplotlib to you. So first, let's see what they are used for. Consider that you are creating a function and you don't know how many input argument the user may want to pass to it. For example, consider sum function. You want to sum, for example, you can sum, for example, 10 arguments, you can sum like 20 arguments, you can sum like 1,000 arguments. So if you want to create some function a function that does whatever the sum function does in mathematics, you cannot just, for example, define like thousands of variables here. In this kind of scenarios, we use args with an asterisk, which simply says to Python that user can pass in as many as arguments that they desire. Let's see an example. For example, here I have fun and it says, hello dear friend, blah, blah, blah. And it simply works. And the args, the type of the args is tuple. Simply this asterisk says whatever that comes in, whatever input variable, argument variable the user passes in, you wrap it inside of a function, inside of a tuple, which is called args. And that's it, as you can see here. So you can have access to those. For example, here, if I change it, if I add my own name, it's not gonna return any error, and it's simply gonna work. For example, let me last name as well, it's gonna work. Doesn't matter how many input arguments you define here, the Python will wrap them into a tuple object in here. You can use type int after args, like this one, integer. As you can see here, we can have an integer. We can define that the input arguments that the user passes mostly is they should be integers. Definitely they can pass other types, but it's better to be integers. We talked about type hinting and type annotation in the previous videos. So as you can see here, we can simply access to each of the arguments and increment some result by the argument. And this type hinting really works. For example, if you put dot and click on the tab, you can see that these methods are suggested by IDE because the IDE Jupyter Notebook considers that they are going to be integers. If I change it to str and again click on tab, it shows me the methods that are defined for a string. So let me change it to integer. And as you can see, the sum function really forks. You can pass, for example, another one like 5. You can pass another one like -5, and it works. So how we can have this positional argument, args, alongside other positional arguments. Consider that you got some positional mandatory arguments that you the user should pass them, like for example arg1, and there are other arguments that you let the user decide how many they want to pass in, like this one. Again, at the beginning, you go on with your positional arguments, then you use asterisk and args. The convention is to call it args, okay? But you can call it whatever you want, but it's better to follow the convention and call it args. So at the beginning, you go on with your positional arguments and you pass their name exactly the way that you want, and you let the user to pass as many arguments as they want through this functionality in Python. So as you can see, it says next argument through args is, for example, welcome to introduction to Python, and so on. So this was about args. Let's talk about arbitrary keyword args. As you may have guessed, kwargs is gonna tell the user that she can pass in as many keyword arguments as you want. And but in this case, you have to pass in keyword arguments. Okay, you cannot pass positional arguments. For example, like here, I want to pass, for example, I want to call the first argument first, and I want to pass Python to it. The second argument, I'm going to call it mid, and the last argument is called last, and you can pass in different variables to it. And again, you have to pass in, when you see this one as a in your function, the function that you're using or the function that you're defining, you should pass in keyword arguments. You cannot pass in positional arguments when it is defined as a keyword argument. And as you can see, it says that func takes 0 positional arguments, but 1 was given. So simply it says you only can pass as many keyword arguments as you can and no 0 positional arguments. So whenever you saw that the type error that says 0 positional arguments, just don't panic. There are some functions defined like this that are defined like this, that they impose the user, they force them to follow to pass in, for example, keyword arguments, like in this example. And again, like the arguments, you can define the annotation, type annotation or type hinting. Again, you only pass one type because definitely the keys are strings like here, so you don't have any choice of using, for example, integers as a strings when you are passing an input keyword argument to a function or other objects. You have to pass in as a strings. Okay, you cannot, for example, pass an integer or so. And one more thing that I have to tell you, when we are using keyword arguments, these keyword arguments are wrapped inside a dictionary, as you can see here. The type of it, it's a dict, and you can you can define the values of that dict's type using this one. Again, Jupyter Notebook realizes and understands the type hinting. For example, when I click on dot, it shows me the methods for integers, and for example, whether I'm going to pass list and click on dot, it says append, clear, copy, which are methods for lists defined inside of a list object. So here you can use kwargs. So before we pass to the next section, let's see when we may need keywords, kwargs or args. We may need them when we've got a general function that it offers several functionalities. In those cases, we may use kwargs to let the users just pass in different, for example, configuration. Okay, consider that you've got a function. It contains like 20 input arguments. Okay, it's better not to define all of them in the function definition, and let the user pass them as keyword arguments. And also, when you use something like this, using, for example, kwargs or args, you should have a great tutorial or great Docker string to help the user understand which kind of input arguments are allowed. Let me show you. This is matplotlib that we're going to talk about, a very comprehensive library with so many stars. Thought I gave it a star before, so okay, we give it a star right now. It's very comprehensive and a lot of people use it. Let me show you where kwargs are used, and as you can see, kwargs are used in 232 places of this code, just in this module. And for example, here at the end, creating figure, at the end it says, you know what, you can pass in your kwargs, and it defines what kwargs should be. It says additional keyword arguments are passed into .figure constructor. So we've got a figure class that it has some again input arguments, so you can pass those arguments through kwargs. So let's see whether we got args or not. Yes, we've got args here. For example, we've got several args, and as you can see, these args are passed to another function. Okay, so when you're using save fig, you should check the documentation and to know exactly what you should pass to this save fig. So this is when you may need to use kwargs when you are working with, when you are creating complicated functions. In that cases, it's better to go on with kwargs, but you have to know what they mean, because if you want to check source codes, the source codes are full of these two arguments, input arguments. So let's see how we can combine these two feature that we So we learned about them. As you can see, at the beginning, we should pass in an argument, which is called a positional argument. Then we can pass as many positional argument as we want. Then we can pass the keyword arguments. So let me show you. For example, here is the name is equal to Puya, Keating is equal to Ya, and blah blah blah. At the middle, we can pass in some keyword arguments with default values as well. For example, here we can pass, I passed name. Okay, let's just pass something. Okay, this one, for example. We can pass this one. So keyword arguments like this, which you know its argument's name should be passed after this args to work. Yeah, exactly, after this arg. And I'm gonna first require the argument, and I'm gonna show you, for example, this is first keyword argument, key-w-arg, let's say like this, and let me pass the value here. Okay, we've got it here. So this is how we can combine them. First, the positional arguments, then the keyword arguments, like a usual function. Just the difference is all about this two features that they define. They tell the user that you can pass in as many positional argument as you want, and here it says you can pass in as many keyword argument as you want. So a very important topic. Let's talk about how we can use them to call a function. So as you may realize, maybe right now you don't have such a complicated function to define that it may need kwargs like the ones that we saw here, okay? Maybe you don't need it, but that's not the only use case of this way of these asterisks, okay? There are several ways to use it to call a function, okay? Maybe you're using a third party libraries, so you want to use this to call a function. Let's see how we can use them. So consider that you got a function like this. It has a 3 input argument, arg1, arg2, arg3, and it happens a lot, okay? You should call them like this, okay? You should pass all the 3 arguments because they are mandatory. There is no default value for any of these variables. So consider that you got another function which is called func2, and the output of this func2 you should pass it to func. It happens a lot in data preprocessing, for example, in different pipelines. The output of one function is passed to another function, and it happens from the beginning of your programming. It's not something that you may say, okay, I'm gonna face this like 2 years from now. No, it's gonna happen even at the first month, because the output of one function should be passed to the second function. It's a very simple use case. So like here, for example, func2 returns a total of 3 items, and I want to pass these outputs as inputs to func function. So the usual way which you may try is like this. Simply you call the func2, you assign it to a variable, and you access it one by one, okay? Input the value in index 0, the value in index 1, and the value in index 2. Simply like that, okay? But as you can see, it may take a lot of time. So using the asterisk, we can unpack a tuple or an iterable, okay? In the first part, we said that args just wrap or pack all the input arguments to a tuple. So the reverse works the same. Using the asterisk here, we can unpack the items inside of a tuple, a list, or an iterable. We can unpack it, and we can after unpacking. What happened? Okay. After unpacking it, we can pass it to func function. here. So let me show you, it works. And you don't need to access to each item by index, and you don't need to put them in their positions, because when it unpacks it by order and pass it to the function. Pass it as input arguments to the function that it is going to call. And it makes it super easy. It removes the boilerplate like this one. It makes it super easy, and you're going to see this type of calling functions a lot in a lot of source codes. And as I told you, it's not just about the tuple and list. It can unpack any iterable, like a string. For example, here I unpack 1, 2, 3 to when I use asterisks, it unpack it to 1, 2, and 3. And each of them are passed to argument 1, argument 2, argument 3, respectively. And again, when you're using unpacking, you should make sure that you are passing arguments by order, and you're passing arguments, and you are filling all of the required arguments. For example, here, when I unpack it, the first arg1 and arg2, both of them have values, but arg3 didn't get any value here. So it raises an error, and it says func missing one required positional argument. So it is no different from just calling a usual way of calling a function. Okay, it is no difference. You should follow the orders, follow the rules, but it makes it easier when you, for example, when you have your arguments that are packed inside of a list or a tuple or other iterables, and you just want to unpack them. It makes it super easy. And the same goes for keyword argument. Let me just annotate it, put a kwargs comment here. Yeah, that's it. The same goes for keyword arguments. Again, consider that we've got a function 3 that returns a dictionary. To unpack a dictionary, we use 2 asterisks, like this one. When we had several keyword arguments, they were all packed, they were all wrapped inside of a dictionary. Again, the reverse works the same, just unpacks a dictionary. Using this one, we can unpack a dictionary, and again, it's super easier compared to this one. Just check it out. It's a lot of code here, but you simply can assign it to a variable and unpack it using 2 asterisks. And again, let's talk about 2 other examples. Unpacking does not need to pass into a function. Okay, it does not need to use for calling a function. When you're creating a list, you can use unpacking. When you're creating a tuple, you can unpack a list or another tuple. For example, here we've got a list which is defined as 1, 2, 3. The last comma is unnecessary. And here, when, for example, you want to create another list, and you want to extend the first one with other values, you simply can call the first one, and you, again, using the asterisk, you can unpack it, put it inside this list, and you can put the rest of your values like this one. And as you can see, 1, 2, 3 are here, like this one, and the 4 and 5 goes after them. The same rule applies to dictionaries. As you can see here, we have a dictionary which is called DCT. I don't know why did I call it that way. And to creating the second dictionary, we can unpack the first one and extend it with other variables that we have. So just I hope you can use this to functionalities using 1 asterisk and 2 asterisks to create complex functions, and also use them to call different other functions with less effort. So We are about to finish this video with these two sections. The first one is a pass statement, yeah, an ellipsis mark. You may see them in some codes. When you're creating a scope, in this case, when you're creating a function, which also functions need scopes as well. For example, you don't know what to pass in, or you just don't want to pass anybody, okay? You're not sure, or you really don't want your function to have anybody, or your scope to have any content. In that case, you can use pass. The pass simply informs the kernel, the Python's kernel, or the core operating part of the Python, that this scope is empty. Ellipsis and pass both do the same. I prefer pass. It simply tells the Python, you know what, pass without any error because the scope is empty, simply, just that. You cannot have a function like this, okay? You cannot have something like this. For example, you want to do blah blah blah, this is not possible, okay? You are going to have indentation error, that because it said when you use colon you should have a scope, but in some cases that you really don't have any scope, you can use pass. In OOP, you may want to inherit from a class, and for example, in that part, you don't have any method or any variable to add to your class. In that case, you may want to use path. Simply, you're just going to say that, okay, this is the class, and I don't want to include any other methods or any other variables, instance variables to it. So you can use paths in there too. And as I told you, path or ellipsis mark does not need to be applied to a function. In any scope, you can use path. And in this example, elif, like if and else, all of them require a scope for themselves. The first one, the last one, they do have a scope, but here it doesn't have, okay? It doesn't have any scope. So you can use pass like this. For example, the target is 11 is larger than variable, and it simply does not do anything because the pass simply tells Python, you know what, the body is empty, just go on, pass. If I change it to 10, it is going to say it is equal, or so on. So the last section is about mandatory positional and keyword arguments. This is a new feature in Python, and we're going to see it. Sometimes you may want to force yourself or force the other users to pass in only keyword arguments, okay? You just want to force them to pass in keyword arguments. There are several reasons. For example, you want to make sure that they pass in the name of the arguments, so they would use your function in a safe manner, and they would be sure that their values are passed to the exact arguments that they want. You want to force it to your user. Actually, when I use this mandatory keyword arguments, I want to force myself at the first place, because sometimes when I have a lot of functions and a lot of methods, I use this mandatory positional and keyword arguments to make sure that I'm going to pass keyword arguments and I'm not going to make mistake. To do so, again, asterisks is used. It's simply whatever that comes after asterisks, an asterisk, in the definition of a function should be passed as a keyword argument. So let's see the error. Actually, this is not an input. This is just identifier. It kind of informs the Python that whatever argument that comes after me should be a keyword argument. And as you can see, when I want to pass Puya and Mohammadi as positional arguments, the type error raises, and this is the message. It says this function takes 0 positional arguments. It does not take any positional arguments. Okay, you should only pass in 2 keyword arguments. So here, when I pass in 2 positional arguments, I get an error, which says that 0 positional arguments is defined in this function, and you were given 2. You gave 2. And as you can see, this is the correct way of using it. Keyword arguments. I pass in keyword argument and it works. Let us try another example here and to just make sure. As you can see, it is not possible to not fill any of these 2 arguments, because these are not arbitrary arguments. Okay, these are mandatory arguments, but at the same time they should be keywords as well. Here, when I don't fill the last name, it says that missing one required. Okay, this is required. This is not arbitrary. You can't just you can't just leave it. Okay, leave it empty. You should pass a value, but it is keyword only. It means you should pass it as a keyword argument, not as a positional argument. So here is a real case of this. The sort function, the sort method, if I want to call it correctly, the sort method in lists. Let me show you the signature of it. It says list.sort, and again asterisk. It has 2 arguments, 2 keyword only arguments, which are not required, okay, because they have default values as well. So when I want to call it using positional argument, it says that sort takes no positional arguments. Okay, the error messages might be different. This one and this one. It says it takes 0 positional argument, but in their message in here it says takes no positional argument, but they both mean the same. You cannot pass positional arguments. You want to use them correctly. Again, this is not correct, because again it says no positional argument, but I passed a key here, key as a positional argument. Again, it says, you know what, no positional argument, because I want to make sure that you are using this input argument correctly. You should pass them as a keyword argument. So the correct way is like not passing anything, because they do have both of them have default values, but we can go on like this as well. Keyword arguments are passed, and LSD is as yeah, this is reverse. So I was panicked. What happened? Why this is like this? Because I set reverse to true. This is in descending mode. It starts to descend 3, 2, 1, 0, and if you put it to false, wow, set it to false, is going to be in ascending mode. So that's it about keyword arguments. We can have positional arguments, but we should define them before this asterisk. As you can see, these 2 should be positional, these 2 should be key, these 2 are key word only argument, but this one, the item, can be a positional or can be passed as a, no, it should be mixed. Sorry about this, let me change these values. Change the name of the function, yeah. The first argument can be passed as a positional and as a keyword argument in both cases, because it is defined exactly like other type of input variables, but first name and last name are after asterisk, which means they are keyword only arguments. So let's see how we can define positional only arguments. We talked about keyword only arguments. So what about positional only arguments? Here we've got a positional only argument. To create a positional only argument, we should use forward slash. Whatever that comes before forward slash should be passed in as a positional argument. Here, for example, first name and last name are annotated, are defined to be positional only arguments, but I passed keyword arguments, and the type error is raised with the message that says got some positional only arguments passed as keyword arguments. It simply says that there are positional only arguments, but you pass them as keyword arguments, this too. So that's why type error is raised. So to use this one as positional, you should pass your arguments as positional arguments. And this is the mixed of these two features, positional only and keyword only arguments. Whatever that comes before forward slash should be positional, must be a positional only argument. Whatever that comes after forward slash can be, it could be positional argument or keyword argument. It is just like usual arguments. But whatever that comes after an asterisk should be keyword only argument, like this one here. And as you can see, the item must be a positional argument. The extra item could be positional and could be keyword argument and could be a positional argument. And first name and last name, they must be a keyword argument. So this is all about positional and positional only and keyword only arguments. There are several of this in here. I said forward slash, not backward slash. And as you can see, for example, here the arg, when you are defining axis, the arg should be must be keyword positional only argument, because it comes before forward slash and emit, and the keyword arguments must be again keyword only arguments because they come after asterisks. And you can find a lot of this here. Actually, there is only one only positional argument, but sorry about that. Here we got okay, let me put comma. Okay, we got this one 24 times. It is used 24 times. So it's most of the times you want to make sure that the users pass in keyword only argument, but you can go on with positional only arguments as well. So this is the end of this video. It was a long video, 52 minutes. So like always, please consider to subscribe the channel, click on the bell ring so you will be notified of the future videos. And as always, you can find all the videos and all the codes in my GitHub repository, which you can find it in the description of the video. Like always, have a great time.